Okay, welcome. I'm sorry I'm not here today. My daughter has some stuff she needs to get done in her mouth, and so I have to take her to a bunch of appointments. However, I am here. I would never leave you guys hanging. Why am I here? Because you have a test on Thursday. We are almost done with this unit. This is the last piece of the learning target we started on Friday, Thursday, Friday. We're finishing it today and tomorrow. What I need you to do is make sure you get out your completed unit circle, the one that you filled in with all of this information. Okay? Go ahead, make sure you have that out, and let's get ready to roll. What I'd like you to do, this is the last piece, is I want you to figure out the exact value for the secant of 3 pi over 2 and the cotangent of 11 pi over 6. So you can go ahead and pause this and give the kids about 5 minutes to do that. When you come back, we'll work on some answers. Okay, magic of television, we're back. What is the secant of 3 pi over 2? How on earth do we figure that out? Well, the secant is 1 over the cosine. So I'm going to go figure out first, what is the cosine at 270 degrees? Well, I've got my unit circle right here, and the cosine down here at 270 degrees is 0. So I'm going to put 1 over 0, but 1 over 0 is that only swear word in algebra. It's undefined. So the secant of 3 pi over 2 is undefined. You have to write that it's undefined. You can't tell me 1 over 0. You need to know that 1 over 0 is undefined at this point in your mathematical career. Okay? Same thing for cotangent of 11 pi over 6. I'm going to go look at 330 degrees. And if you remember from Friday, the cotangent is 1 over the tangent. So this says flip the tangent. Well, I'm going to go and figure out what the tangent is. The tangent of 330 degrees is my y value over my x value. Look at your unit circle. If I go over to 330 degrees, my y value is negative 1/2. My x value is the square root of 3 over 2. Well, what do I have to do? I have to flip that fraction. So the cotangent of 11 pi over 6 is equal to, I need to take this, and these guys have got to flip places. Whoops. They have to flip places. So my denominator is negative 1/2. My numerator is the square root of 3 over 2. But you can't leave your answer like that. We've got a fraction over a fraction. If you remember how we divide fractions, it's keep, change, flip. So if I have 1/2 divided by 5/7, I take 1/2, keep, change to multiplication, 7 over 5, I get 7/10. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. Keep the first fraction, square root of 3 over 2. Change to multiplication, flip negative 1/2. I'm going to flip it to negative 2 over 1. So what do I get when I multiply across? Negative 2 square roots of 3 over 2 times 1. Well, these negative 2's cancel out, so I get negative square root of 3. Okay, so the cotangent of 11 pi over 6 is negative radical 3. So that's refresher from Thursday, Friday. Let's jump into the other piece of today. We are going to talk about inverse trigonometry, inverse trig. You've got that? All right, I want you to write this down, every single word. What is this equation asking you to find? What is the sine of 300 degrees asking you? I want you to write down the sine of 300, and now you need to write this down. This is asking, what is the y value at 300 degrees? That's what the sine of 300 is. What's the y value at 300 degrees? Well, if I go over to 300 degrees, my y value is negative square roots of 3 over 2. That is the y value, okay? Not bad. We've practiced that. Now we're asking something a little different. I'm introducing to you to a new function. These are inverse trig functions. Inversely, when we say the inverse sine of 1/2, so I want you to write down this is the inverse sine of 1/2. It's not sine to the -1. It's not an exponent. This says the inverse sine of 1/2. We are asking, you need to write this down. What angle has a y coordinate of 1/2? So this says, I'm giving you the length. You tell me the angle. Inverse trig gives us the angle. So inverse trig gives us the angle. So you're going to take your unit circle and you're going to go look up. What angles have a y coordinate of 1/2? Well, 30 degrees does. 150 degrees does. That's it. I've got 2 of them. So 30 degrees does. 150 degrees does. Are those the only 2? You should say no, because what happens if I go another 360 degrees around? Isn't it true that 390 has a y value of 1/2? Isn't it true if I add another 360 here? 510. So there's an infinite number of angles that have a y value of 1/2. So we've got to put a limit on this. In this course, we are going to restrict the domain. Okay. You're going to be able to use a note card on your test with this information, but for right now, I want you to get this just in your notes. I need 3 columns. One says inverse function. The next one says restricted to. The next one says what quadrants. So we're going to be able to look at the quadrants, and that's how you're going to answer your questions. We're going to have 6 rows, 3 columns. Pause at any time that you need to so you can get this written down. All right, the first inverse function we have is sine inverse. Sine inverse is also the same as arcsine. You'll see them both. They mean the same thing. Sine inverse, the inverse sine is restricted to -pi/2 to pi/2 on the unit circle, which is really 270 degrees to 90 degrees. So our answers are going to be limited to quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Okay, so we're going to look here. Which quadrant should I go in? We're going to limit our answers to that. Next one, we've got inverse cosine. Inverse cosine is the same as arc cosine. They mean the same thing. We're going to restrict our answers to those angles that happen between 0 and pi. Well, 0 and pi are in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, so our angles are going to be restricted to quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 for inverse cosine. Now we're going to talk about inverse tangent. Inverse tan and arctan mean the same thing. Okay? We're going to restrict our answers to angles that happen between -pi/2 to pi/2, which means we're only going to look in quadrants 1 and quadrants 4 for those answers. Okay? Next, we are going to talk about the inverse cosecant. Inverse cosecant is the same as arc cosecant. As you can see, we restrict our answers to -pi/2 to pi/2, which is quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Again, pause this whenever you need to give everybody a chance to write this down. The fifth inverse function is inverse secant. Inverse secant is the same as arc secant. We're going to restrict our answers to 0 to pi, which restricts us to quadrants 1 and 2. Last but not least, we've got inverse cotangent. Inverse cotangent is the same as arc cotangent. We restrict our answers to angles that happen from 0 to 2 pi. Angles that are in between 0 and 2 pi show up in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So you can go ahead and pause and let everybody get caught up on this one. We're going to come back and look at this chart as we work, okay? All right. So here is your first question. Find the exact value. You cannot use a calculator on this test, guys. Find the exact value. I need to know what angle has a y value of radical 2 over 2. This is the inverse sine of radical 2 over 2. So this is, tell me the angle whose y value is square root of 2 over 2. So the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, are we looking at x or y coordinates? Well, sine goes with y, so we're looking at a y coordinate. Is this argument, square root of 2 over 2, is it positive or negative? It's positive. Which quadrant are we in? I'm going to go back and look at that sine table. That sine table says I'm restricted to Q1 and Q4. So I'm going to go right down here. My answer can either come from Q1 or Q4. So I'm going to go find every angle who has a y value of the square root of 2 over 2. Well, that happens right here at 45 degrees. That's the only angle it happens at, and that occurs in quadrant 1. So 45 degrees is the answer. That is the inverse sine of the square root of 2 over 2. Okay? So we're kind of backwards. We're looking up and we're looking up backwards. All right, let's try another one. This says what angle has a cosine of negative 1/2? So what angle has a x value of negative 1/2? So I'm looking at an x value. He's negative. Cosine, I'm pretty sure cosine is in quadrants 1 and quadrants 2, but I'm going to go double check my table. And cosine, that's true. My angles can come from quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. So let's go look. Negative 1/2. I need to look at angles whose x value is negative 1/2. Well, the only place that happens is 120 degrees, and so I said Q1 or Q2. It's got to be Q2 because the argument is negative. So the cosine, the inverse cosine of negative 1/2 is 120 degrees. Okay? All right, let's go try another one. Okay. I'm looking for the inverse tangent of the negative square root of 3. So this is a little trickier. My answer is going to be an angle. What angle has, remember tangent is y over x. Tangent is y over x, which is sine over cosine. So we're going to have to reduce some fractions, okay? Stop groaning. It's okay. You can do it. Okay, so what angle has a sine over cosine equal to negative square roots of 3? So my answer has to be negative. And let's go see, what quadrants am I allowed to pick angles from for tangent? Tangent is Q1 and Q4. So I'm looking at Q1 and Q4. Okay, so I know that my answer has to be, this fraction has to simplify to a negative number, which means quadrant 1 is out. Q1 will result in a positive fraction. So I can't use him because if I put y over x, I'll get a positive number. So now I'm going to go look at what angles have a radical 3 in one of the coordinates. So I know I'm going to look at either 330 degrees or I'm going to look at 300. One of those two. So 330 or 300, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to do a guess and check. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take sine over cosine, and I'm going to start with 330 first. So the sine of 330 degrees is negative 1/2 over radical 3 over 2. Okay, so remember, I've got a fraction divided by a fraction. This is keep, change, flip. So keep the numerator, change your sign to multiplication, flip your denominator, 2 over the square root of 3. When I simplify this, I get negative 2 over 2 square roots of 3. But I can't have a radical in the denominator, so you guys know what to do. We have to rationalize. So I end up with negative 2 square roots of 3 over 6. But 2 and 6, those simplify. And I end up with negative square roots of 3 over 3. That's not the answer I wanted. The answer I wanted was this. So I bet you my answer is 300 degrees, but I'm going to prove to you how this works. So we're going to go we're going to check 300 degrees. I'm going to go draw a line through this because this is not what I wanted. So at 300 degrees, I'm going to put the sine over the cosine. So my y value at 300 degrees is negative square roots of 3 over 2. My x value at 300 degrees is 1/2. Now I go through and I do keep, change, flip. Negative square roots of 3 over 2. Change, flip, right? Whoops, how about 2 over 1? When I multiply, I get negative 2 square roots of 3 over 2. 2 divided by 2 cancels to 1. It is, in fact, 300 degrees. The shortcut to this, guys, is if you try 330 and it doesn't work, you know your answer is 300. Okay, so that's how we can get through this quicker. So what is the inverse tangent of negative radical 3? Your answer is 300 degrees. All right, let's try another one. Ooh! Let's find the angle whose secant. The secant is, inverse secant is 2 square roots of 3 over 3 negative. Well, does secant go with x or y? The secant is what? So if we go back and we look, secant is 1 over the cosine, and cosine is my x value. So I'm looking for 1 over x, which means I'm going to have to take a fraction and flip it. I'm looking at a negative number because I've got a negative symbol right there. And let's go figure out what quadrant does inverse secant, what quadrant is he in? Inverse secant is in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. So I'm going to write that down. I'm looking at Q1 or Q2. Well, I know since I have a negative, my result is negative. Q1 is out because these are all, everything over here is positive, positive. All right, so I've got negative 2 square roots of 3 over 3. What this tells me, this negative 3 tells me I'm either at 120 degrees or 150 degrees. Okay? So let's try 120. What is the cosine at 120 degrees? If I go to 120, my cosine is negative 1/2. If I flip it, it's negative 2. So, nope, it's not 120 degrees. Let's try 150. So if I go to 150, what's my cosine at 150 degrees? Ha ha. My cosine is negative square roots of 3 over 2. But I have to flip it because I'm looking for the secant. So the secant says flip. So I'm going to flip this number. My minus sign stays. My 2 comes in the numerator. My radical 3 goes in the denominator. And now I know you're groaning. This isn't so bad. Let's rationalize the denominator. I get negative 2 square roots of 3 over 3. Is that what I wanted? It is. So what's the angle? 150 degrees is my answer. And cotangent, last one, the cotangent. So what angle has a cotangent? Cotangent is what? Well, cotangent says flip the tangent. So if my tangent was y over x, My cotangent is x over y. So I'm going to look for x over y. And this is a positive, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm looking for a positive number. And cotangent, look in your chart. Cotangent is quadrants 1 and 2 is where I can pull my angles from. So let's go to quadrant 1 or quadrant 1, quadrant 2. Well, since it's positive, I'm looking in quadrant 1. So I'm looking for the square root of 3 over 3. Since it's the square root of 3, I'm looking at 30 or I'm looking at 60. One of these ratios will simplify to this fraction. So this is what we're looking for. The ratio of x to y will simplify to the square root of 3 over 3. All right, let's go for it. You want to try 60 first or 30 first? Okay, 30 it is. So at 30 degrees, I need my x. My x is the cosine. My sine is 1/2. And if I keep change flip, I get the square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1, which is the square root of 3. That's not what I want. So what's the only other angle who has this? Well, it's got to be 60 degrees. So I can just shortcut this and say 60 degrees. If you want to prove it to yourself, this is how you do it. For 60 degrees, I'm going to take x over y. So I'm going to look at 60 degrees. My x is 1/2. My y is the square root of 3 over 2. Now I'm going to keep change flip. Keep change to multiplication, flip. 2 over the square root of 3. So I end up with 2 over 2 square roots of 3. Those 2's cancel. 1 over the square root of 3, but then I have to rationalize, and I get the square root of 3 over 3. Done. That's how you can prove it's 60 degrees. Okay? Thanks for bearing with me. Your work in class is to do the odds, both sides of this half sheet, okay? Both sides of this half sheet are due tomorrow. If you're struggling with this, watch this video at home. It's posted a link through my website, okay? We have a summative this Thursday on this learning target. You are going to be asked these type of problems. You're going to be asked, what is the sine of pi over 2? You're also going to be asked, what is the inverse cosecant of 1/2? Okay? So, and there's no calculator on this. All right. Thank you for sticking with me. Have at it. Get to work, okay? Thanks. Bye.